I am Bailey, 29 years old, and until last month, I was the most dedicated marketing manager at Frost & Blackwell in downtown Chicago. My colleagues used to joke that I lived at the office, and they were not entirely wrong. The day I collapsed, I was giving a presentation to our biggest potential client. One minute I was explaining quarterly projections, the next the room started spinning. I woke up in a hospital bed alone, tubes snaking from my arms, monitors beeping steadily beside me. The doctor mentioned they had called my emergency contacts, my parents. Checking my phone, I saw a notification my sister Tiffany had tagged me in a family photo. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most. Growing up as the eldest child in our middle-class home in Brookline, just outside Boston, I learned early that responsibility was my assigned role in the family. My parents, Michael and Diana Watson, had very different expectations for me compared to my sister Tiffany, who is 4 years younger. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, help with household chores, and set a good example, Tiffany was allowed to focus on having fun and expressing herself. Our childhood home was comfortable, but ran on unspoken rules. Dad worked as an investment advisor at a regional bank, putting in long hours and bringing home stress that we all tiptoed around. Mom taught third grade at the local elementary school, and somehow always had energy left to attend all of Tiffany's dance recitals and soccer games. My academic competitions and debate tournaments often went unattended because they coincided with Tiffany's events, or were simply deemed less exciting. I still remember my high school graduation when my parents gave me a practical luggage set for college while cooing over the expense of Tiffany's upcoming Sweet 16 party the following month. The contrast was always stark, but presented as normal. When I got accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, my parents congratulated me, but immediately explained that I would need to take out student loans and work part-time to cover the remaining costs. 3 years later, when Tiffany decided she wanted to attend NYU to study fashion design, my parents liquidated investments to pay her full tuition, housing, and living expenses. When I questioned the disparity, Mom patted my hand and said, "You were always the independent one, honey. Tiffany needs more support to thrive." After college, I secured a marketing position in Chicago and built my career methodically. Every promotion was earned through late nights, skipped vacations, and relentless dedication. Meanwhile, Tiffany bounced between jobs in New York, calling home whenever her rent was due or her credit card was maxed out. My parents always came through for her, often calling me afterward to discuss their financial concerns, but never connecting those concerns to their ongoing support of my sister. Holiday gatherings became a predictable performance. Tiffany would arrive late with exciting stories about her social life and creative pursuits. My parents would hang on her every word while asking me about my 401 kelvins contributions and whether I was getting enough fiber in my diet. I became the family fixer, the one everyone called when they needed practical solutions, but never when they were celebrating. When I accepted the position at Frost & Blackwell in Chicago 5 years ago, the increased distance from Boston provided some relief. Our family interactions settled into a pattern of monthly obligation calls and annual holiday visits that felt increasingly hollow. I maintained polite but distant relationships with everyone, telling myself that was simply how adult family dynamics worked. My life in Chicago revolved around my career. I purchased a beautiful one-bedroom apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, but rarely enjoyed the view. My typical day started at 5:30 in the morning and ended well past 9 at night. Weekends were for catching up on work projects rather than building friendships or dating. The few friends I maintained were mostly work colleagues who understood my devotion to career advancement. The promotion to senior marketing manager last year came with a substantial raise and an even more substantial increase in responsibilities. I was assigned 3 major clients and expected to grow their accounts by at least 20% annually. The pressure was intense, but I welcomed it as validation of my worth. While my personal life withered my professional reputation for reliability and perfectionism flourished. Looking back, the warning signs were there for months before my collapse. Persistent headaches that no amount of over-the-counter pain relievers could touch. Fatigue that made even simple tasks feel monumental. Occasional dizziness when I stood up too quickly. But acknowledging these symptoms would have meant slowing down, and slowing down felt like failure. So I pushed through, convinced that after the next deadline, the next presentation, the next quarter, I would finally take time to rest and recover. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and change clothes. The refrigerator contained only cold brew coffee protein bars and expired yogurt. My one indulgence was an expensive mattress that I justified as an investment in efficiency, allowing me to maximize the limited hours I dedicated to sleep. I had created a life that looked impressive on paper, but felt increasingly hollow in reality. As my 30th birthday approached, I found myself working harder than ever, as though hitting that milestone without achieving some undefined level of success would constitute a personal failure. My boss had hinted that a director position might open up by year-end, and I was determined to be the obvious choice. That determination would eventually land me in the hospital, though I had no way of knowing that at the time. The weekend before my collapse was spent entirely in the office preparing for Monday's presentation to Hightower Group, a potential client that could increase our departmental revenue by 30%. I ordered delivery to my desk, drank countless cups of coffee, and ignored the increasingly severe headache that had started Friday afternoon. By Sunday evening, my vision occasionally blurred, forcing me to take short breaks before continuing to refine the presentation slides. Monday morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. When my alarm sounded at 4:30, I struggled to lift my head from the pillow. The headache had transformed into something monstrous, pulsing behind my eyes and wrapping around the base of my skull. The dizziness that had been occasional was now persistent, making the simple act of showering a precarious task. I skipped breakfast, knowing from experience that food might make the nausea worse. I applied extra makeup to hide the pallor of my skin and dark circles under my eyes. The Hightower presentation was scheduled for 10, and nothing short of physical incapacitation would make me miss it. Looking back, that is exactly what I was experiencing, but I refused to acknowledge it. The conference room was packed with potential clients and our executive team. The projector cast a harsh light that intensified my headache, but I smiled through the pain and launched into my carefully rehearsed presentation. 15 minutes in, the words on my note cards began to swim. I gripped the podium tighter, determined to push through. Then came a rushing sound in my ears like waves crashing on a distant shore. The room tilted, faces blurred, and darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. My last coherent memory was of my boss lunging forward as I began to crumple, then nothing but fragments, voices shouting for someone to call 911. The cold floor against my cheek. Paramedics asking questions I could not quite grasp. The wailing siren as the ambulance navigated Chicago traffic. A doctor shining a light into my eyes in the emergency room. The sharp sting of an IV needle. Then, merciful unconsciousness. I woke up hours later in a hospital room, disoriented and alone. A monitor beeped steadily beside me, and my arm was tethered to an IV pole by a thin tube. A nurse noticed I was awake and approached with efficient kindness. "Welcome back," she said, checking my vital signs. "I am Jenny. You gave everyone quite a scare." My throat felt raw, making speech difficult. "What happened?" "You collapsed during a presentation. Your blood pressure bottomed out and you were severely dehydrated. The doctor will be in shortly to discuss your condition, but you will need to stay with us for a few days." She helped me sip water through a straw, the cool liquid, a balm to my parched throat. When the doctor arrived, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, the diagnosis was delivered with blunt concern. "Miss Watson, you are suffering from severe exhaustion, dangerous dehydration, and alarmingly low blood pressure. Your body is essentially shutting down from chronic stress and self-neglect. When was the last time you ate a proper meal or slept more than 4 hours?" I could not remember which was answer enough. The doctor continued explaining that my workaholic tendencies had pushed my body past its limits. Without significant lifestyle changes, I risked serious long-term health consequences. I would need to remain hospitalized for monitoring and treatment for at least 3 days. "We contacted your emergency contacts," she added. "Your parents correct. We left messages explaining the situation." A cold weight settled in my stomach. I knew immediately they would not come. Chicago was a 2-hour flight from Boston, and my hospitalization would not qualify as a priority in their world. Still, some childish part of me hoped that perhaps this time would be different. As the doctor left, Nurse Jenny helped me get more comfortable, arranging pillows and adjusting the bed to a semi-reclining position. Unlike some of the other staff, she seemed to notice that no one had arrived to sit with me, to hold my hand, or bring personal items from home. Her small kindnesses, bringing an extra blanket, or spending a few minutes chatting when checking my vitals, became anchors in the lonely hours. The hospital room was sterile and impersonal. The rhythmic beeping of monitors and the squeak of rubber-soled shoes in the hallway my only companions. A small window offered a view of another wing of the hospital, gray walls and identical windows reflecting my isolation back at me. Time stretched and contracted, strangely marked only by medication schedules and shift changes. By the evening, no family members had arrived or called the hospital. I asked Jenny for my phone, which had been stored with my personal effects. The battery was low, but had enough charge for me to check messages. There were several concerned texts from my boss and coworkers, but nothing from my parents or sister. Instinctively, I opened Instagram, a habit when feeling disconnected. The first post in my feed stopped my breath. Tiffany had posted a photo taken at our family's summer cabin on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. The image showed my parents, sister, aunt, uncle, and cousins gathered on the dock, everyone smiling broadly in the golden afternoon light. The timestamp indicated it had been posted just 2 hours after my collapse. The caption read, "Family day without the drama. Number blessed, number family time, number no drama mama." I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. This gathering had not been planned spontaneously. Our family's annual week at the lake cabin was a tradition that required coordination months in advance to accommodate everyone's schedules. I had not been invited. While I lay in a hospital bed, my family was deliberately enjoying time together without me, and my sister was publicly celebrating my absence. The comments beneath the photo twisted the knife deeper. My cousin Amber had written, "So peaceful this year." My mother had replied with heart emojis and "perfect day with perfect people." Even my usually reserved father had commented, "Best lake day in years." As I scrolled through the comments, the physical pain in my body seemed to merge with the emotional wound being inflicted. My heart rate increased enough to trigger an alert on the monitor, bringing Jenny back to my room. She found me clutching my phone, tears streaming down my face. "What is it? Are you in pain?" she asked immediately, checking my IV and monitors. My family, I managed turning the phone to show her the image. They are all together. They did not even tell me. And now that I am here, I could not finish the sentence. Jenny looked at the phone, then at me, compassion filling her expression. She gently took the device and placed it on the side table. "Sometimes the family we are born into is not the family that deserves us," she said, quietly, adjusting my blankets. "I have been a nurse for 23 years, and I have seen that more times than I can count. But I have also seen people create their own families with the people who actually show up." Her words were both a comfort and a confirmation of what I had long suspected but had been unable to admit. As night fell over Chicago, I lay in the hospital bed alone, but somehow less lonely after Jenny's kindness, beginning the painful process of seeing my family clearly for the first time. The hospital room grew quieter as night shift began, with only the soft glow of monitors and occasional checks from night staff breaking the darkness. Sleep eluded me, despite the medication and exhaustion. The image of my family gathered without me played on repeat in my mind, along with the caption that so casually revealed how they truly saw me as drama they were happier without. The initial shock gave way to waves of hurt that felt physical, causing my chest to tighten and breath to catch. I had always suspected I was less cherished than my sister, but to see such explicit evidence of being not just less loved, but actively excluded, hit with unexpected force. The betrayal felt new and ancient, simultaneously, a confirmation of fears I had carried since childhood. Jenny returned around midnight to check my vitals immediately, noticing my tear-stained face and the untouched dinner tray. "Still awake, the pain medication should help you sleep," she said, checking the monitors. "It is not that kind of pain," I replied, my voice hoarse. She nodded understanding and sat on the edge of the bed, an action that went beyond professional duty. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes it is easier with a stranger." Perhaps it was the medication, the vulnerability of illness, or simply having reached my breaking point, but words began spilling out. I told her fragments of my family history, the pattern of being the responsible one who was perpetually sidelined, how I had built my entire identity around being useful and productive, because being loved for myself had never seemed an option. "I keep thinking about all the times I dropped everything to help them," I confessed. "Last year I flew to Boston on 2 hours' notice when my father needed help organizing their tax documents. I missed a major work event to help my sister move apartments after her roommates suddenly left. When Mom needed a new car, I researched models for weeks and negotiated with the dealer on her behalf. But when I am the one in need, they are nowhere to be found," Jenny finished gently. "What hurts most is realizing this gathering was planned. They all coordinated schedules, took time off work, arranged travel. They just deliberately did not include me." Jenny was quiet for a moment, checking my IV with practiced movements. "You know, in my job, I see a lot of people at their most vulnerable, and I have noticed something. Some patients have rooms full of visitors, flowers, piling up, phones constantly ringing. Others, just as deserving of love, lie alone. It rarely has anything to do with the patient's worth, and everything to do with the capacity of the people in their lives." She adjusted my blanket with motherly care. "Your family's limitations are not a reflection of your value. Sometimes the people who should love us the most simply do not have the capacity to do so. That is about them, not you." Her words settled over me like a balm, not erasing the pain, but somehow making it more bearable. After she left, I lay awake considering the patterns that had defined my life. Each memory took on new meaning in light of the family photo and caption. I remembered my college graduation, how I had searched the audience for my parents, only to find they had seated themselves far in the back and left immediately after the ceremony to beat traffic. My first major promotion celebration, where my mother had spent the entire dinner taking calls from Tiffany about a breakup. Last Thanksgiving, when my carefully prepared meal was met with complaints that it was not as good as the previous year when Tiffany had ordered from a restaurant. In each instance, I had swallowed my hurt and doubled down on trying harder, being more perfect, more helpful, more understanding. I had internalized the narrative that I was difficult, too serious, lacking the natural charm my sister possessed. I had accepted that I needed to earn love through utility. The pattern extended beyond family. I had few close friends because I struggled to believe anyone would want my company unless I was providing something tangible. My romantic relationships inevitably dissolved when partners grew frustrated with my inability to prioritize connection over work. Even my career success, the one area where my dedication seemed rewarded, had ultimately led me to this hospital bed. The morning brought a visitor, not family, but Julia, from work carrying a small plant and a tote bag of essentials. Julia was our department's project coordinator, someone I had worked closely with, but never socialized with outside the office. Her arrival was unexpected and touching. "The whole office is talking about what happened," she said, placing the plant on the windowsill. "I thought you might need some things." She unpacked the bag, a phone charger, dry shampoo, lip balm, a paperback novel, comfortable socks. Small comforts that revealed thoughtful consideration of what a hospital stay required. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "You did not have to do this." "Of course I did," she replied simply. "We are a team, right, and the team takes care of its own." Her visit lasted only 30 minutes before she had to return to work, but it shifted something in my perspective. This colleague, with whom I had never shared personal confidences or social time, had shown more genuine care than my own family. She had noticed I was alone and took action to provide comfort. As the day progressed, I made a decision that felt both small and monumental. I would not comment on or react to my sister's photo. Previously, I would have swallowed my hurt and posted something supportive, maintaining the facade of family harmony. But as I reached for my phone, I felt a wave of exhaustion that had nothing to do with my physical condition. I put the phone down without opening the app. For the first time, I chose not to participate in the performance of family happiness. I silenced notifications as I noticed my heart rate increasing whenever the phone buzzed. The doctor had warned that stress would impede my recovery, and I was finally taking that warning seriously. That night, after a day of medical tests and enforced rest, I slept deeply for the first time in months. Without the pressure to respond to maintain appearances, my body surrendered to the healing it desperately needed. It was a small act of self-preservation, but it felt like the first step on a new path. The 3 days in the hospital passed in a blur of blood tests, monitoring, and stern conversations with medical professionals about the changes I needed to make. Dr. Reynolds, a cardiologist, brought in to consult on my case, was particularly blunt. "Your body is sending you messages that you have been ignoring," she said, reviewing my chart. "Chronic stress, sleep deprivation, and poor nutrition have put you at risk for serious cardiovascular problems despite your young age. This collapse was a warning. The next one could cause permanent damage." She prescribed medications to stabilize my blood pressure and outlined lifestyle modifications that sounded simple but would require dismantling the entire structure of my daily life. 8 hours of sleep, nightly, regular, nutritious meals, exercise that did not include running between meetings, and most challenging, stress reduction. Your body cannot tell the difference between running from a predator and racing to meet a work deadline, she explained. Both trigger the same stress response. You have been living in a constant state of fight or flight, and your system is shutting down in protest. Throughout my stay, the hospital staff could not help but notice the absence of family visitors. The intake forms listed my parents as emergency contacts, yet no calls had come from them to the nurse's station. No worried relatives appeared with overnight bags or home-cooked food. Instead, Julia visited twice more, bringing magazines and company news that she carefully framed to avoid causing stress. My boss sent a formal flower arrangement with a card, promising we would revisit workload upon your return. Even the Hightower Group, the clients who had witnessed my collapse, sent a fruit basket with wishes for recovery. By the third day, Dr. Reynolds cleared me for discharge, with strict instructions for follow-up care and a medical leave of absence from work for at least 2 weeks. Julia arrived after her workday ended to drive me home, having volunteered, when she learned I was planning to take a rideshare. "You cannot be serious," she had said when I mentioned my transportation plan during her visit. "I will pick you up. Text me when they are ready to release you." My apartment felt strangely unfamiliar after just 3 days away, as though my brief absence had highlighted how little presence I actually had in the space. Julia helped settle me in unpacking the hospital bag and organizing my medications on the kitchen counter. She opened windows to release the stale air and made up the bed with fresh sheets she found in the linen closet. "When was the last time you actually cooked something here?" she asked, peering into my nearly empty refrigerator. "I cannot remember," I admitted. "I usually eat at the office or order delivery." Julia shook her head and pulled out her phone. "I am ordering groceries to be delivered. Basic staples and easy-to-prepare meals. Doctor's orders include proper nutrition, right?" Her matter-of-fact kindness brought unexpected tears to my eyes. This woman, who was essentially a work acquaintance, was showing more care for my well-being than the people who had raised me. "Thank you," I said, voice thick with emotion. "I do not know why you are doing all this, but thank you." Julia looked up from her phone, expression serious. "Bailey, you have pulled all-nighters to help me meet impossible deadlines. You took the blame when I missed sending that crucial report last quarter. You remembered my birthday when everyone else forgot. Did you think I would not notice? You were the only one who never asked for help, but always gave it." Her words stayed with me after she left, having extracted a promise that I would actually rest and call if I needed anything. The apartment felt both empty and peaceful in her absence. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be, no deadlines looming, no presentations to prepare. The silence was disorienting, but gradually became comforting. I followed doctor's orders with the same diligence I usually applied to work tasks. I took medications at precise times, prepared simple meals from the groceries Julia had ordered, and actually sat at my small dining table to eat them rather than hunching over a keyboard. I slept for 10 hours straight. The first night home, waking disoriented but remarkably clear-headed. The second day of my recovery at home passed in a similar fashion. I discovered I could sit on my balcony and actually see a slice of Lake Michigan between neighboring buildings, something I had never noticed before. I started the novel Julia had brought to the hospital, losing myself in fiction for the first time in years. I avoided checking work, email a restraint that caused physical anxiety at first, but gradually became easier. It was not until evening that I remembered my silenced phone. No doubt work messages had accumulated, and I would need to at least check if anything urgent required attention despite my medical leave. When I finally turned on notifications, the phone began buzzing, continuously, alerts stacking upon alerts. 36 missed calls, 22 voicemails, 47 text messages. My heart rate immediately spiked, the familiar anxiety flooding back. But as I began sorting through the notifications, I realized something strange. None of the missed calls or messages had come during my hospital stay. They had all started the previous evening, around 7 p.m., and continued with increasing frequency through the night and day. All from my parents and sister. The most recent text received just 20 minutes earlier was from my father. "We need you. Answer immediately." No mention of my hospitalization. No concern for my condition. No acknowledgement of the family gathering from which I had been excluded. Just urgent demands for my attention now that they needed something. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, and began listening to the voicemails in chronological order. My mother's voice came first, casual as though we had spoken recently. "Bailey, honey, call me back when you get this. We have a bit of a situation with Tiffany's business, and we need your financial expertise." The next few messages gradually increased in urgency, with my father taking over to explain that Tiffany's boutique clothing business was failing, and they had invested quite a bit to help her launch it 6 months ago. Money I had known nothing about from their retirement accounts. "We need to figure out how to recoup some of these losses," my father explained in message number 7. "Your sister is devastated, and your mother is beside herself with worry. Call us back." By message 15, my mother was crying, begging me to answer, saying they had nowhere else to turn. My sister's voice appeared in message 18, angry rather than pleading. "I cannot believe you are ignoring everyone when we are in crisis. So typical of you to disappear when the family actually needs you." The final message left by my father just an hour ago made the specific request clear. "Bailey, we need you to transfer $15,000 to help cover the business loan payments while we sort this out. It will just be a short-term loan. Call me immediately to arrange the transfer." $15,000. A sum that represented most of my emergency savings funds I had methodically built up through years of careful budgeting. Money that was meant to be my safety net, now expected to clean up a mess I had known nothing about. As the reality of their expectations sank in, I felt my chest tighten and headache begin to return. My body was physically reacting to the stress of their demands, exactly what Dr. Reynolds had warned against. I put the phone down and consciously took deep breaths until the symptoms subsided. I had an almost automatic urge to respond, to fix the situation, to be the reliable daughter they only seemed to remember when they needed something. My fingers hovered over the phone, ready to call back and arrange the transfer, despite my own precarious health and finances. The pull of lifelong patterns was powerful, the fear of disappointing them deeply ingrained. But something had shifted during my hospital stay. The stark contrast between Julia's genuine concern and my family's complete absence during my medical crisis could not be ignored. The reality that I had been deliberately excluded from a family gathering while my sister publicly celebrated my absence as a relief could not be rationalized away. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that this pattern would never end unless I ended it. They would continue to take what I offered, exclude me when convenient, and return only when they needed resources. And I would continue to deplete myself trying to earn the love that should have been freely given. I placed the phone on the coffee table without calling back. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and returned to my novel. The decision not to immediately respond felt both terrifying and liberating, a small act of self-protection that represented a seismic shift in my understanding of family obligation. By morning, the missed call count had increased to 42. The voicemails became increasingly detailed about the financial situation my family faced. According to my father, they had invested $60,000 from their retirement savings into Tiffany's boutique clothing business launch. The business had failed to gain traction, with expenses far exceeding revenue for 6 consecutive months. Now creditors were calling, and the landlord of the retail space was threatening eviction. The money had been given to Tiffany without formal loan documents or business plan review, based solely on her enthusiasm and some sketches of clothing designs. My father, who had lectured me about financial responsibility since childhood, had apparently abandoned all his principles when it came to my sister's dreams. We believed in her vision, he explained in one message, voice defensive. She just needs a bit more runway to make it work. My mother's messages focused on the emotional toll, describing Tiffany as completely devastated and blaming herself, though her own voicemail suggested otherwise. I did everything right, my sister insisted in her message. The market just is not ready for my designs. And Dad did not give me enough startup capital to really do it properly. The specific amount they wanted from me, $15,000, was characterized as a temporary loan to keep things afloat while they sorted out a more permanent solution. But I had heard similar promises before, on a smaller scale. 3 years ago, I had provided $5,000 when Tiffany needed to pay off credit card debt. 2 years before that, I had contributed $3,000 toward replacing my parents' water heater when it failed in winter. Neither sum had been repaid, and any mention of repayment had been met with hurt feelings and reminders of family obligation. As I reviewed the messages, I found myself mentally calculating whether I could afford to help them. The $15,000 in my emergency fund represented years of careful saving, often at the expense of personal comfort or experiences. I had maintained that fund through economic downturns and career uncertainties, seeing it as my only true security in a world where, as was now painfully clear, I could not count on family support in crisis. If I depleted those savings now, I would have no financial cushion during my medical leave. My health insurance covered most of the hospital expenses, but the deductible and copays were still substantial. The lifestyle changes my doctors had prescribed, including better quality food and reduced work hours, would impact my budget. And there was no guarantee I would not experience additional health issues requiring time away from work. I called Julia, needing an outside perspective from someone who had demonstrated genuine care. "They want how much," she exclaimed when I explained the situation. "After not even checking if you were alive in the hospital. That is insane, Bailey." "I know it sounds bad," I found myself saying, the reflex to defend my family still strong. "But they are in a really difficult position. A position they created by giving your sister money for a business with no plan," Julia pointed out. "And now they expect you to sacrifice your financial security when you are literally recovering from a health crisis their behavior helped cause." Her bluntness was startling, but clarifying. When laid out so plainly, the absurdity of the situation was impossible to ignore. Still, years of conditioning made the idea of refusing their request feel like a betrayal. "What if they really do need the money, though?" I asked. "What if things get worse for them?" Julia's voice softened. "Bailey, ask yourself this. If the situations were reversed, if you were the one who had made a bad investment and needed financial help, would they empty their savings for you?" The question hung in the air, its answer too painful to articulate. We both knew they would not. They had not even been willing to provide the non-financial support of visiting me in the hospital or checking on my recovery. After ending the call with Julia, I sat on my balcony watching the sliver of lake visible between buildings. The water changed colors, with the shifting clouds, blues and grays, merging and separating in constant motion. I thought about the patterns in my own life, how I had allowed the same dynamics to play out repeatedly, always hoping for a different outcome. My phone buzzed with another incoming call from my father. I watched it ring, feeling the familiar pull to answer, to fix, to accommodate. But alongside that conditioned response was something new: anger. Not the hot reactive kind, but a steady, clarifying anger that illuminated the injustice of what was being asked of me. I picked up my discharge papers from the side table, reading again the warnings about stress reduction and self-care. Dr. Reynolds had been unequivocal: without significant lifestyle changes, I risked permanent health damage. My family's financial crisis and the emotional manipulation accompanying it represented exactly the kind of stress I needed to eliminate. I began typing out a text to my father, the habitual words forming automatically. "I will help however I can. Let me look at my accounts and see what I can transfer." But halfway through, I stopped, finger hovering over the keyboard. A physical sensation of release spread through my chest, as though tight bands were finally loosening. I deleted the draft and set the phone down deliberately. Instead of responding, I made a cup of herbal tea and returned to the balcony with my journal. For the first time, I wrote honestly about my family dynamics, putting into words the patterns I had observed but never acknowledged. I documented the specific instances of unequal treatment, the times I had been called upon for help, but excluded from celebration, the consistent message that my worth was tied to my utility. The act of writing these truths was both painful and freeing. Seeing the patterns laid out in my own handwriting made them impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. This was a lifelong dynamic, and it would continue unless I chose a different response. I decided to wait until I felt stronger both physically and emotionally before engaging with my family's demands. My health had to come first, a concept so foreign it felt almost selfish. But the alternative, throwing myself back into the role of family fixer at the expense of my recovery, was no longer an option I could accept. That evening, I prepared a simple but nutritious dinner and ate it at my dining table, looking out at the city lights beginning to illuminate the dusk. For the first time in my adult life, I was consciously putting my own well-being ahead of others' expectations. The guilt was present, but no longer overwhelming. Alongside it grew something unfamiliar but essential: self-respect. I had underestimated my family's determination. The morning of my 5th day home from the hospital, a sharp knocking at my apartment door startled me awake. Disoriented and still weak from my medical ordeal, I pulled on a robe and cautiously approached the door. A glance through the peephole revealed my parents standing in the hallway, expressions tight with impatience. My heart immediately began racing, the physical symptoms of stress returning instantly. I had not responded to their calls or messages, a silence unprecedented in our family dynamic. Of course, they had escalated to showing up unannounced, a 5-hour journey from Boston to Chicago. I opened the door, still processing the shock of seeing them in my building. My mother gasped slightly at my appearance, which I knew showed the lingering effects of my collapse. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and I had lost weight. I could not afford to lose my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. "Bailey," my mother exclaimed, "you look terrible. Have you been sick?" The question confirmed what I had already suspected. They had not listened to the hospital's messages. They had no idea I had been hospitalized. "Yes," I said simply. "I was in the hospital for 3 days last week. I collapsed during a work presentation." A flicker of concern crossed my father's face, quickly replaced by his agenda. "We have been calling you for days. Why have you not answered?" No questions about my condition. No expressions of worry or offers of help. Just irritation that I had been unavailable when needed. "Come in," I said, stepping back from the door. "We should talk." They entered my apartment with the slightly judgmental assessment they always brought to my living spaces, eyes cataloging what they perceived as evidence of my too serious work-focused lifestyle. My mother immediately began straightening items on the coffee table, a habitual action that suddenly struck me as intrusive rather than helpful. We would not have had to come all this way if you had just answered your phone. My father began taking a seat on the couch without being invited. This is a family emergency, Bailey. Your sister's business is failing, and we need your help to salvage the situation. We invested most of our extra retirement funds, my mother added, perching beside him. We believed in Tiffany's dream. I remained standing, gathering strength for what needed to be said. When did you make this investment? About 6 months ago, my father replied. Tiffany had these incredible designs, and the business plan looked promising. Business plan, I repeated. May I see it? My parents exchanged glances. It was more of a verbal plan, my mother admitted, but Tiffany was so passionate about it. You know how creative she island. And now, you need $15,000 from me to cover loan payments, I said, keeping my voice level. Because the business is failing. It is not failing, my father corrected sharply. It is experiencing cash flow issues. Very common in new businesses. Did you know I was in the hospital? I asked, changing direction. Another exchange of glances. We got some message from an unknown number, my mother said vaguely. But we have been so overwhelmed with this situation, I guess we did not listen to it. The hospital called you because I collapsed at work from severe exhaustion and dangerously low blood pressure, I said. I was unconscious when admitted. They used the emergency contact information in my personnel file. You were listed as my emergency contacts. My father shifted uncomfortably. We did not know it was serious. You did not know because you did not listen to the messages I corrected. And you did not listen because you were all at the lake house having a family gathering I was not invited to. The mention of the lake house caused my mother to flush slightly. That was just a spontaneous little get-together, she began. No, it was not, I interrupted, surprising all of us with my firmness. Our annual lake house week requires coordination months in advance. I saw the photos Tiffany posted. Everyone was there except me. I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up my medication bottles, bringing them back to show my parents. This is what I take now to stabilize my blood pressure. This one is for anxiety. This is to help me sleep. My doctor says my collapse was caused by chronic stress and self-neglect. She says, without significant lifestyle changes, I risk permanent health damage. I set the bottles on the coffee table between us. Part of reducing stress means reevaluating relationships that contribute to it, including family relationships. My father's expression hardened. What exactly are you saying, Bailey? That you will not help your family in a crisis after everything we have done for you? The question hung in the air, breathtaking in its lack of self-awareness. After everything they had done for me. I thought of the empty hospital room, the sister who celebrated my absence, the parents who could not be bothered to listen to messages informing them their daughter was seriously ill. I am saying that I will not transfer $15,000 to cover poor financial decisions I had no part in making, I said calmly. I am saying that I need to prioritize my health right now on doctor's orders. And I am saying that our family dynamic needs to change if we are going to have a relationship moving forward. My mother's eyes filled with tears, her go-to response when confronted. How can you be so selfish? Your sister is devastated. We might lose our retirement savings. I am sorry that is happening, I said sincerely. I truly am. But using my emergency fund to temporarily delay the consequences of decisions I was not consulted on is not a solution. It is a band-aid that does not address the underlying problem. And what problem is that my father demanded? That I am only valued in this family when I am useful, I replied the truth. I had never spoken aloud, finally emerging. That I am excluded from family gatherings but expected to empty my savings account when needed. That my sister can publicly celebrate my absence as making things less dramatic, and neither of you disagree or defend me. My father stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We have always treated you and your sister equally. If you feel less included, maybe consider that your constant focus on work and achievement makes you difficult to be around. The comment was so perfectly aligned with the family narrative about me that it almost made me laugh. Even now, confronted with evidence of their neglect during my health crisis, they found a way to make it my fault. I will not be giving you the money, I said firmly. I cannot afford to financially or emotionally. I am happy to provide emotional support during this difficult time, but my savings need to remain intact while I recover. I cannot believe you would abandon your family like this, my mother said, tears now falling freely. After all, we have sacrificed for you. What exactly have you sacrificed for me? I asked quietly. Because from where I stand, I have been the one making all the sacrifices. I paid my own way through college, while you covered Tiffany's full tuition. I built my career without support, often missing opportunities, because I was handling family obligations. I have provided financial assistance multiple times without being repaid. And when I was lying unconscious in a hospital bed, you were all having fun at the lake without even knowing or caring where I was. My bluntness shocked them into momentary silence. Then my father gathered his keys and stood. We will not forget this, Bailey. When you decide to start acting like a real family member again, you can call us. A real family member, I repeated, like one who would visit their daughter in the hospital, or check if she was all right after a medical emergency, or include her in family gatherings. My mother stood as well, wiping her tears. You have changed, she said accusingly. You are not the daughter we raised. No, I agreed. I am finally becoming someone who values herself enough to set boundaries. And that is actually a good thing, even if it does not feel like it right now. They left with final comments about selfishness and family loyalty, the door closing behind them with a finality that felt both heartbreaking and necessary. I stood in my living room shaking slightly from the confrontation, but also experiencing a strange calm. For perhaps the first time I had spoken my truth without apologizing or backing down. The tears came later, of course. Grief for the family relationship I had always wanted, but never truly had. Mourning for the love I had spent a lifetime trying to earn through perfect behavior and unlimited giving. Relief that I had finally stopped participating in patterns that were depleting me physically and emotionally. That night I slept deeply and without medication for the first time since returning home from the hospital. My phone remained silent, no more desperate calls or texts arriving. The silence felt less like abandonment and more like the absence of a constant, painful noise I had grown so accustomed to that I had stopped noticing its impact. The weeks following my family confrontation unfolded with surprising gentleness. Without the constant pressure of trying to earn approval or fix others' problems, I found space to focus entirely on my recovery. I followed Dr. Reynolds' instructions with disciplined care, viewing my health as the foundation upon which everything else would be built. My apartment gradually transformed from a place I merely slept to a true home. I added plants to the windowsills, hung artwork I actually loved, rather than generic pieces that photographed well for social media, and created a comfortable reading nook in the corner with the best natural light. Simple changes that signaled a profound shift in priorities. The medical leave extended to 3 weeks on Dr. Reynolds' recommendation. During my follow-up appointment, she noted improvements in my blood pressure and overall vitality, but emphasized the need for continued lifestyle modifications. Recovery is not linear, she cautioned. You will have days when old habits feel easier, when pushing yourself seems necessary. Those are exactly the moments to remember what brought you here. I took her words to heart, creating structures that supported my health rather than undermined it. Morning walks along the lakefront replaced immediate email checks upon waking. Meal preparation became a form of mindfulness rather than an inconvenience to be minimized. I established firm boundaries around sleep, setting an alarm to begin winding down rather than just to wake up. Julia remained a consistent presence, checking in regularly and eventually inviting me to a casual dinner with a few colleagues outside of work. I was surprised to discover how much I enjoyed their company when not focused on professional advancement or impression management. These connections, based on genuine interaction rather than utility, became the foundation of what I would come to recognize as my chosen family. The fourth week after my collapse, I joined a support group for adults navigating difficult family relationships. The first meeting was terrifying, the vulnerability of sharing my experiences with strangers almost overwhelming. But hearing others articulate feelings so similar to my own provided validation I had never experienced. The shame that had accompanied my family situation began to dissipate as I recognized the universal nature of these struggles. Therapy became another cornerstone of my recovery. Dr. Andrews, a compassionate but direct psychologist specializing in family systems, helped me untangle the beliefs that had driven my behavior for decades. We explored the origin of my conviction that love was conditional and had to be earned through achievement and usefulness. We examined how these beliefs had shaped not just my family relationships, but every area of my life, from career to friendships to self-care. What we learn in our family of origin becomes our operating system, she explained during one session. It runs in the background, determining our choices without conscious awareness. Your task now is to recognize when that old programming is running and consciously choose different responses. The grief process was perhaps the most challenging aspect of recovery. Acknowledging that my family might never provide the love and acceptance I deserved meant mourning both past hurts and future hopes. There were days when the loss felt overwhelming, when I questioned my decision to establish boundaries, when the familiar pull to return to old patterns felt almost irresistible. On one such difficult day, I received an unexpected text from my neighbor Sarah, a woman I had barely spoken to despite living across the hall for 2 years. Made too much soup. Would be a waste to freeze it. Interested. That simple interaction became the beginning of a friendship that would prove crucial to my healing. Sarah, a graphic designer who worked from home, had a natural warmth and authenticity that made connection easy. Our soup dinner extended into hours of conversation, revealing surprising commonalities in our life experiences. I moved to Chicago to put some healthy distance between me and my own family circus, she confided over dessert. Best decision I ever made, even though it hurt like hell at first. Sarah introduced me to her friend group, a diverse collection of individuals who gathered weekly for game nights or movie marathons. Unlike the networking events and professional mixers I had prioritized in the past, these gatherings had no agenda beyond enjoyment and connection. I found myself laughing, genuinely sharing opinions without calculating their professional impact, and developing friendships based on compatibility rather than convenience. As my return to work approached, I scheduled a meeting with my boss to discuss expectations and boundaries. I had prepared a thorough presentation of how my workload could be more effectively distributed among team members, benefiting both individual well-being and departmental outcomes. I expected resistance or disappointment in my new limitations. Instead, I found unexpected support. Bailey, your collapse in that conference room was a wake-up call for the entire leadership team, my boss admitted. We have been examining our culture and expectations. The truth is, we do not want high-performing employees who burn out after a few years. We want sustainable excellence, which requires sustainable practices. The company had implemented changes during my absence, stricter enforcement of working hours, redistribution of workloads, even bringing in consultants to assess team health. My return came with a restructured position that leveraged my strengths while respecting reasonable boundaries. The most surprising development came 6 months after my hospitalization, when my expertise in reorganizing our department led to a promotion to operations director, a role that actually required less grinding effort but more strategic thinking. The irony was not lost on me. By prioritizing my well-being over achievement, I had become more effective and valuable professionally. Throughout this period of transformation, my family remained distant. Occasional text messages arrived from my mother, usually brief and superficial. My sister maintained complete silence, apparently holding firm to her narrative of me as the difficult, dramatic one. My father sent a single email acknowledging they had figured out the financial situation without burdening me, the passive-aggressive tone unmistakable. I responded to these communications with polite but firm boundaries, no longer apologizing for having needs or limits, no longer accepting blame for dynamics I had not created, no longer rushing to solve problems at my own expense. The distance was painful, but necessary for my continued health and growth. 9 months after my collapse, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice sounded different, less certain of her position. "Your father and I have been talking," she began. "We may have handled things poorly when you were ill." It was not quite an apology, but it was the closest my family had ever come to acknowledging their part in our dysfunctional dynamic. The conversation that followed was awkward, but represented a tiny step toward potential healing. Not the immediate reconciliation and validation that movies portray, but the messy, imperfect beginning of a shift. Over the following months, limited contact with my family continued on these slightly altered terms. My mother occasionally asked about my health in a way that seemed genuinely interested. My father remained distant, but refrained from financial requests. My sister eventually sent a brief text acknowledging that her business failure might not have been entirely the market's fault, her version of admitting responsibility. These small shifts did not erase the past or suddenly create the loving family I had always wanted. But they offered the possibility of a different kind of relationship, moving forward, one based on reality rather than performance, with boundaries that protected my well-being. The most profound change, however, was internal. I no longer measured my worth by my productivity or usefulness to others. I recognized my inherent value as a human being deserving of care and consideration. I learned that true family, whether biological or chosen, supports health rather than contributing to illness. My apartment now regularly hosts small gatherings of friends for dinner or game nights. Sarah, from across the hall, brings her famous brownies. Julia and her husband contribute obscure board games no one can quite figure out. Other friends from my support group work and various activities create a tapestry of connection that feels both safe and stimulating. The journey from collapse to rebuilding has been neither quick nor easy. There are still days when old patterns call to me, when the urge to prove my worth through endless giving and doing feels overwhelming. But I have developed tools to recognize and redirect these impulses before they undermine my health. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome of my medical crisis has been finding comfort in my own company. The woman who once filled every moment with activity to avoid confronting emotional emptiness now enjoys quiet evenings, with a book mornings watching the sunrise over the lake afternoons, exploring Chicago's neighborhoods without agenda or timetable. I have become my own good companion, neither avoiding solitude nor fearing it. Looking back at that day, I collapsed. I now see it as the necessary breaking that allowed for authentic rebuilding. Sometimes we need to fall completely apart before we can construct something real and sustainable. The foundation I am building now, brick by brick, day by day, is not dependent on others' validation or approval. It is strong enough to support not just survival, but genuine thriving. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a major wake-up call? Has illness or crisis ever forced you to recognize toxic patterns you had been tolerating? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more authentic conversations about family dynamics, setting boundaries, and building a life that honors your well-being. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is simply to put yourself first. Until next time, take care of your precious self.